All right, everyone. It's good to see you, my friends. It's been so long. It's May 23rd, and we're here for a brief work session ahead of our next budget meeting. And this follows up on a retreat where we're looking at each of our American Rescue Plan Act funded activities. And we've got some fairly good direction with many of them. You know, in this coming agenda cycle, for example, we've got the mental health facility that will join some ARPA dollars with our SPLOST dollars. You know, we're really far down the road, obviously, in housing, given that we've expended the funds, and we've got, of course, a long-term plan under development with these dollars. And then similarly with homelessness, we're going to be getting a report from Cloudburst in the late summer or thereabouts. But one of the areas that we've not been able to get some traction on is the workforce area. And so what I've done is drafted a document that you've got in front of you. And it makes just a very brief amendment to the language that was approved in March of 2022 by the commission at the time, and then suggests a task force. You know, one of my responsibilities in this role as mayor is putting together committees. And so one way that we might advance this work around workforce is to put a task force together that I would name the police representative from some of our key stakeholder groups in the community. And so I've drafted a prospective charge too. So I'll go ahead and read this so you've got it in front of you, and then we can talk through both the language and then the prospective charge. So what the commission decided in March of 22 is that the initial advisory group for business development and workforce support is to be determined following discussion at an upcoming mayor and commission work session. They will be charged with identifying priority actions needed for small business development and worker empowerment, regardless of funding source. Special consideration should be given to addressing the needs of workers, including, for example, the following, and you see the bullet points below that at the top of the page: childcare, cooperatives, et cetera, high quality labor standards, and affordable nonprofit programming to assist workers in organizing for improved working conditions and or higher wages. A small phrase that I added that comes up recurrently in community conversation is connecting Athens residents with high wage employment. And as long as I've been doing work here, I mean, even back when I was not in a policymaking role, just as a middle school teacher, is the sense that, you know, hey, there are these jobs out there, but are Athenians really the ones being connected to jobs, whether it's in manufacturing or biotech or other kind of positions? So I just added that small clause as a prospect. And then if we were to pursue a task force that I would name kind of in my authority as mayor, you know, I noted that some of the prospective participants could be the Career Academy, somebody from Department of Economic Development, Minority Business and Nonprofit Corporation, the Northeast Georgia Black Chamber, the Joint Development Authority that we stood up with Winterville, that of course gave out those grants last year and the year before with CARES dollars, the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Justice Coalition. And then the charge that I've drafted in prospect is to meet from August to December of 23 and to use a research basis to define optimal and achievable outcomes with recommendations regarding capital expenditures and programming to come to the mayor and commission in January of 2024, utilizing $4 million of ARPA funds allocated for this area, along with potential future activities. And I note that because, as I think we've all discovered, $4 million maybe to the layperson on the street seems like a lot of money. But then when it comes to really putting something into play, you know, it's only going to go so far. And as I will often note to, you know, other folks in the public sector, you know, would rather us do a few things well than a bunch of things poorly. Yeah. I don't always use that phrase poorly. I use some other language sometimes, but I want us to do something substantive. And, you know, I imagine with $4 million, that may mean one or two or three things, but it's not going to mean 10 or 15 things. Right. So this is kind of my first cut at this, and I wanted to bring this to everybody for any input that you have, staff side or commissioners.
Me. Yes. Could we possibly also think about a position for someone, if not on the school board, but works within the school district community to possibly be on this board? Because they know you know,
Yeah.
the ins and outs.
And Career Academy obviously is kind of under the umbrella, but there may be somebody else in there who, I might even ask for a superintendent's designee or somebody else.
And on that same note of the list of people there or groups on there, did you leave Athens Tech out on purpose?
I did not leave Athens Tech out on purpose. I don't know what their capacity is, but I'm certainly glad to.
I think that we should make the effort, like if there's a choice again not to participate, but they should be included.
Yeah.
One thing that came up when we were in our retreat a couple weeks ago was the fact that we have issues with some of these nonprofits, having their own workforce capacity to adhere to reporting requirements and stuff. And I'd like to see us put feelers out to kind of develop a workforce that can do that work in the nonprofit sector, but dealing with the kind of nuts and bolts business aspect of it.
Wouldn't it be like a component of HCD though? Because I've been doing my due diligence and it looks like that is a component of HCDs. That's what they do. Nonprofit could be capacity building or.
And there's a prospective line item in this year's budget around.
Yeah, but I'm talking about building interest within the community, within the potential workforce for people to want to do that work, to set it up as a career, the potential career for folks out there to get into that kind of work, whether they're working for HCD or they're working for a nonprofit that I'm reporting to.
In community buildings.
Yeah, community buildings, kind of social services, nonprofit, business development, I don't know what you call it. People who are doing kind of the business side of nonprofit.
Yeah, Jesse.
Three suggestions. One is I'd like to see FCCIS, Family Connection Communities and Schools, added for consideration, specifically thinking about the childcare component. And I know members of that organization have expressed interest in maybe helping develop a program that could look at that. I'd also like us to consider someone from the co-op world. So the Georgia Center, I'm forgetting the acronym right now, but I sent the email about that. And the Georgia Cooperative Development Center, GCDC, that's what it is. And then right now you have minority business and nonprofit corporation. I'm assuming that's one seat. I would suggest maybe doing it as 2 seats, a nonprofit and a minority. And I would suggest that those be specifically a small minority-owned business and a small nonprofit, because a lot of this is trying to think about how do we grow smaller. So however we want to define small, there's kind of a federal definition, I think, of small business.
And this is the actual organization with this title.
Oh, that's the minority business and nonprofit corporation is an organization.
Is the organization.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm unfamiliar with that corporation.
That's Michelle Pearson's group.
Okay. Well, then you can scratch that one. The only other thing I wanted to add was I think for staff, it's crucial for us to have staff in the room, I think. But in my mind, it makes sense to have them in the room in an advisory capacity, but as non-voting members. And to Tiffany's point, adding HCD and probably the inclusion office as departments that we want to have looped in alongside economic development, provided the commission agrees. I think that would be pretty helpful.
So, Mayor, you mentioned that we had a vote back in March, and that vote was to
bless this language in moving forward with expenditures around ARPA funds.
okay.
So that was a year.
But yet this group's mission is going to be define what is optimal and achievable.
Yeah.
And so they can go through this list and raise one up.
Right.
Maybe.
I got some concerns.
Yeah.
And I raised them before. The last 2 bullet points. Well, in the first one, high quality standards such as wage for 15 pay option, pay healthcare, other benefit, just cause termination, non-profit assist working labor organized for improved working conditions. If we're looking to attract businesses, and I'm assuming that's part of this workforce, it could be a non-starter for businesses relocating to our area if they think these some of the things that we're looking for them to be there. I rather, especially when you put a cap on wages, because I think what you do, you tie yourself in. A business wants some of the business coming in, biotech company, but average salary will be $82,000. So we don't want to put a cap on what the wage for should be, in my mind. But I think it can be a non-starter for businesses to relocate. They see this type of language that we're looking in order for people to go to work here. So since y'all already voting on it, I get that piece, but I hope the committee look at this. I think it's important that we, especially large companies, and most of them, as you all know, if they relocate to the South, in the South, everybody looking for quality employees, but at the same time, they're looking to avoid labor organization in the just cause termination agreement. They just part for the course. So, again, so I can't do anything about this now because we're voting on, but I do have some angst about this. So,
Well, I've often thought that, obviously those conversations about the kind of cultural norms of, say, the Northeast, other parts of the country, Chicago versus the South, that there's probably some sweet spot just in terms of people's awareness of existing rights. I often worry, in the same way that we talk about concerns about tenants' rights, that there's a lot of stuff that's in the law right now that people just don't even know about. And I don't want people to not know about that. I mean, heck, in the same way that I think I've emailed out the various homestead exemptions that people can access about 20 times in the last couple of weeks, just because I was like, hey, y'all, this is an opportunity. I want you to know about it, in the same way that it's an opportunity for you to have fair wages and decent labor standards and be paid overtime and the things that are already on the books. So I see that as an opportunity for us for consciousness. So Allison, I have
Yeah, thanks for putting this together with an action item. Will we get to move forward with this with head shakes with you as far as, we're not going to vote for this assembly. And I'm saying that because what I would like the opportunity to be still available when this group convenes, that they look around and go, oh, we're missing and add two, but potentially two more that this group might feel should be added. I'm just wanting it to be growable as this group convenes and could be looking around and they could be saying, why isn't, we're missing something, and allow that.
Well, obviously, when I name the group, I would want that to be a pretty solid cluster, and certainly until it gets named and memorialized, I think there could be some evolution. So if any of you think about some likely prospects, either in terms of institutional roles or specific individuals, I want to hear that from you. And I would imagine that, like with a lot of these working groups, there will be expertise that will be brought in. Somebody might be a child care expert, and they don't want to be there for 4 months of dialogue, but they do want to let you know, hey, here are the challenges in terms of the child care economy right now. Here are the practical needs if you want to open up a child care center that people might not be thinking about. Somebody might come in for that kind of.
Well, I realize, that each topic is going to be studied, so therefore it can be defined from the research, what's optimal and achievable, as if, if we have empty spots in current daycare spot, whatever our current occupancy is versus thresholds versus us doing a better job with in-home. I think people are staying home now for childcare. Maybe we could make it easier for them to have 1 or 2 children with them. Those sort of things on that, just as an example. But I guess what I'm wanting to share with the group is that once this assembles and they feel that we've missed something, I'm just saying our group might not be able to come up with what that is, but this group could. And I hope that we can add to it if they ask for that.
And I'll circulate this some certainly before naming it. I mean, this really is this is draft 1 because I want to get this. I want to get this going, and B, we got a deadline because we've got to utilize these funds by the end of 2026. And as we've all learned, if we don't start now,
so when you're circulating this, I guess you'll have your 2 commissioners named, and then each of these entities will see the group, and then you're saying you'll get feedback from them saying, should we add such and such at that point? Okay, thank you.
Well, I would like to volunteer myself, only because my district has the largest industrial complex. Not just that, well, that is one criteria. Also because I want to learn. So think of me.
All right,
Keep me in mind.
absolutely. Go ahead, Nick.
I just, I'm thinking about what Dexter was drawn to the bulleted list, and this is as much, I don't know, the way writing and layout draws your attention to something. And I see that bulleted list and I'm like, there's my focus. But really, it's the second sentence that provides more, the main direction. They'll be charged with identifying priority actions needed for connecting Athens residents with high wage employment, small business development, and worker empowerment, regardless of funding sources. So there's some way, like, I want to, like, nothing in that list, for example, ties in with connecting Athens residents with high wage employment. And so I don't want to, I guess I want to emphasize that, or if you want to have something in there that addresses that, because people do go to those bulleted lists and say, well, that's what they really want us to work on. Like, because those are more specific.
So you're thinking something, another bullet that maybe speaks more directly to that.
To that, if you're giving such as in specifics, yet there's nothing that ties to that point that you just made. It's all about small business development and worker empowerment. Yeah.
Would that be solved by the top, including but not limited to?
Yeah, but it does kind of say that, including, for example, but I still think there's a message there sent there. Specialized training. I mean, I keep thinking about that new development and making sure that there's very specific training at the high school in Athens Tech that's focused, that looks at, like, here are the job requirements for those jobs. And let's make sure they're embedded in this program at Athens Tech and here, and advertise that out and communicate that with the people at that new development. So, I just want to put something in the bullet list that connects to that point that you just added.
But if we are modifying what was voted on March 2022.
Yeah. I just don't want
If
to
that's possible, we might have to have a bigger discussion to change something that's been voted on.
Well, we would have to, I mean, even the clause that I added.
Yeah,
That's what. This would need commission endorsement.
Okay, all right.
What I'm saying is I just want something to parallel with that if we're adding that in there, so we don't misdirect the group. I want the group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this will be in the August vote cycle, August 1 vote cycle.
Yeah.
Sort of your summary of this, and you'll have names to go with at that point, type
Yeah.
levels. Okay, thanks.
Yes, see, all of these.
Cecily?
Yes, and I'm working on
This one.
a suggested clause to add per Commissioner Meyer's suggestion and kind of in line
Yeah.
with, I think we pulled from the Tuscaloosa trip. So this is just off the cuff, but like maybe adding a bullet that says building local workforce pipelines that get Athenians into sectors
Yeah,
for which public institutions are struggling to recruit and retain talent. And so that includes everything from
from now,
social workers to healthcare workers, to
yeah,
public
yeah.
utilities workers, to CDL drivers.
Yeah.
And then, the commissioner,
which ties to the Tuscaloosa thing, right? Yeah.
and I just wanted to speak to Commissioner Fisher's concerns, if I may briefly. My size, but not exclude when we're talking about these things. So when we say special consideration should be given, it's not exclusive consideration. It's sort of, if you've got two businesses that are the same and one pays higher wages, we want to find a way to figure out what they're doing to try to elevate other businesses to do the same. So that's not necessarily excluding who we're recruiting from out, but thinking more about how do we elevate businesses that are already within our community to be able to improve what they're paying or what they're providing in terms of HR benefits to their staff. And I think where we really see that lacking is less with the larger employers and more with those smaller local businesses. So the thinking behind, well, we've got this ARPA money, is there a way that we can help fill some kind of gap in the community for local businesses or smaller nonprofits to be able to raise their wages or provide some of those, just cause clauses in the agreements, things like that. And yeah, I guess just like specifically thinking in my mind that this was about elevating Athens businesses to be able to succeed better in competing with those larger businesses. So I hope we retain that angle, not to say that that's solely what we do, especially if we're building in this kind of workforce pipeline and we're talking about the way that this plays into economic development, industrial development. That's fine. I'm not against that. I just don't want to have that totally overshadow the intention to build up some of our existing businesses here. And I just keep returning to that presentation. Well, we've gotten that presentation a few times now from different people on like 25% of our economy is in sectors that chronically underpay. And so what can we do to try to support that sector of our economy that's not going away to be able to pay a bit better?
I mean, it's interesting even in terms of the opportunities that are out there that I think people don't know about. I was in a meeting yesterday, and somebody who's in finance was illustrating that an underused asset in terms of federal policy, there's a 25 cent on the dollar tax credit right now for anybody who offers childcare to their employees. So, if Allison's Eatery says, hey, I'm going to help my employees out with their childcare because I know that that's limiting their ability to be there. For every dollar she puts in the kitty, federal government's going to give her a quarter back.
Some good information to share. I'm gonna start branching out on my
But I
offerings for my employees.
but I do know, and again, I know y'all got, at the $15 thing should be there. I think that should be over because the way the economy is now, the way things are progressing, people are already up in their wages. I just don't want to be locked in on 15 because say somebody can pay 20, but say, well, hey, they said 15, we'll give 15. So I don't want, I don't
Do we want livable wage, like a livable wage floors?
that could, because I just don't want to be locked in on 15. I think that can handicap us. It's
So
something.
living wage generically is kind of what you're thinking rather than a specific dollar.
And maybe we can cite the MIT calculator that we was talking about at the reference point, which floats according to what the cost of living.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so I don't want to just be capped at that, and somebody could possibly pay more. But they're saying, well, Athens, because that's the time we pay, even if it's a system, if it's an assistant business locally, and they still think they can pay what they're paying, then they're not gonna raise those floor levels. So I just don't want to be locked in.
Blaine, is there anything from a staff capacity and management perspective that you'd offer? I know this is relatively fresh for you, but.
Well, I two things. One's facilitating the process itself. And so, we were looking for economic development department to step in. You've listed them here. We have a workforce specialist in Gustavo. I think this is a little more, sort of a small business, different sector that you're talking about. And we do, Young was hired recently. I haven't spoken to Boca about any of this. But I think we could, obviously staff the effort. Some of these are some specialty, childcare and cooperatives and, labor organizing. Those are just not part of what we do. It doesn't mean we can't, if you don't want us to, but it could be that we get a facilitator that's got some skill in that, help, work with the group. So that's on the short end. Now, the long term, and of course, we can discuss this later. But if you're looking for staff to help develop these cooperative businesses or, assist in labor organizing, either we might need to hire somebody outside or we may need a position to do that. Because Young is a small business, and I don't want to call names here necessarily, but, the folks that we have are doing certain things, and if we do new things, then maybe a new person does a new thing.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to, get to December and have 3 primary recommendations and all 3 of those are outsourced.
Yeah, a lot of times when we get these stood up, we don't just define ahead of time who's going to chair it, but maybe part of this is just build into this who you imagine would chair it, which could be yourself or, one of the commissioners that you appoint is there to serve also as, chair of the committee to kind of see it forward, just a bit of.
Yeah, I was gonna name a couple commissioners. I'm taking on, youth along with the school board president. And so I'm trying to be conscious about my capacity.
Your delegate comes to mind.
Yes.
And of course, I like to do youth development.
And workforce development is right up my professional alley, so.
Maybe that's a good. Sounds like commissioners to turn in their resumes. Right, well, these two.
I'll open a portal for this.
I'm only teasing. I think the two of them would be fine.
Any other thoughts that you would like baked into this before it ultimately comes back to you in July, August timeframe?
Maybe just the timelines here, but I guess like an expectation of frequency of meeting, we're inviting people to kind of be in this,
Yeah,
to meet monthly and get a recommendation by December versus,
I'm imagining twice a month.
yeah, so just kind of building it into the language so that people know what they're signing up for when they get appointed.
See, y'all been so fresh, full of ideas, lively. I like the half-hour meetings here. Let's make this.
Yeah, we'll see if we can do
We'll
that.
just meet every Tuesday afternoon for half an hour. You're on into a kind of,
Motion to adjourn?
Second, keep it, moving.
anything else?
Second.
I didn't know,
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
well, I had.
Thank you.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Yeah, thank you. Just quickly,
Hold that money.
this morning, myself and, Commissioner Taylor sent out the, commission to find option of youth development. I hope, I see the mayor, on that. And, hopefully you all have opportunity to read it. If you haven't read it, hope you have opportunity to read it. And, where I want to go ahead and, I'd like to move forward, with the, recommendation and that the, staff, the manager's office, along with our parties, to make sure that we can do it. I know we have to do a agenda and vote on this and stuff like that, but, just want to put that on y'all, plate. I know the mayor and the, Building School Board has met, but I felt like that we need to go ahead and get this ball rolling. And with that, we still have 4 million in youth development. I know when I left, CCSD, they had a little bit over 6 million in youth development fund. I'm not sure whether they still got that. So then, we're gonna join forces. I think it's a great idea. I think if we're gonna be, and I know I use the word a lot, intentional, we need to go ahead and get started. And my hope is, once we do get started, if this is successful, then we say, well, hey, we already got a model. Go ahead and start building on that. It really impact our young people in this community.
And I was at graduation yesterday because I'm in these streets. But I was able to speak with a representative from from the school district. And I kind of ran over just the CDO that we talked about earlier to see if there could be some possible partnership or capacity building in the near future for the school board to partner with us in this effort to alleviate some of the financial aspect of it. And they thought that it was a great idea, that this was the opportunity that the school board is looking to possibly be able to work within the community, a step further from just being in the schools and a part of a board, but to actually get within the community and work with these towards this effort. I also told them that we were working to get only 2 of the recreation centers open because 2 of them have already been open and Paldo is no longer Paldo, so they don't have a recreation center. But they thought that it would be a great idea. I told them that we would, let them jump on the bandwagon because we know that this is going to be successful because it's a need within the community. And don't be surprised if somebody reach out to you.
Good. Well, the last conversation I had, we had 2 consecutive conversations a week apart. The last one a week and a half ago, Dr. Gant and I, and where she left it is that she wanted us to craft an MOU that the school board could approve at their June meeting, and we may approve, might even do this at the work session date in June, the 7th. Give us all a little bit of time. or the July meeting, one or the other. But it would be pretty simple. And it would kind of follow that format that you saw earlier, that I sent out with that Friday email. The one thing that, that may be helpful when we're looking at the expanded expenditure with the Boys and Girls Club is some defined focus. As y'all know, when you're talking youth, you could be talking from straight out of the maternity ward up to 18. And, you know, we may want to say, you know, are we, and the Boys and Girls Club obviously has expanded their programming the last couple of years. You know, are we specifically violence prevention focused? Are we specifically, you know, early adolescence and teen focused versus say the elementary? You know, we may want to just give them some direction rather than kind of just have the big landscape. So, you know, just be thinking on that.
Yeah.
So my question is, Mayor, if we move forward with this, when I left it initially with my last, our last paragraph, as soon as possible. So when do we think we can get this on, you know, because I really, my hope was, especially with the community centers, we're trying to get them open by the summer. I just think it's, you know, in school direct let out this week, you know, but I didn't know where we are in the hopper to get this going.
I think in practical terms, you know, if this got approved in June, we'd probably be looking at some kind of autumn initiation, just in terms of staffing.
Okay.
And in terms of kind of building management. I mean, just, you know, having run a school and knowing just what it's like to sweep up the floor and make sure there's AV equipment and all those kinds of things. I couldn't imagine that even if we passed the Boys and Girls Club, we'd probably be looking at anything earlier than September, even if we had a June approval, just given their existing programming. I mean, they've already hired summer folks. I mean, they're getting around today, you say tomorrow's kids' last day. So, you know, just in terms of managing expectations, I would have to imagine that would be the likely earliest initiation date for new programming.
Well, it also ties into the fact that we wanted the community centers to be, recreation centers to be open year round. So even if it started at the beginning of school, it does give staff, I don't mean this staff, but I mean like staff within the recreation centers enough time. Well, you know, we all start at the same time.
And beyond summer.
There you go.
Well, yeah, because and the reason the amount was because we want to see year-round programming. We don't want to just see summer. We want to see year-round programming. And again, and I know we have to work out the language, but and I hear we want to see what that impact going to be like, what the outcomes are. Are we making progress? I think part of it will be a reporting mechanism to us at the commission,
right,
so we'll know what's going on. And all those dollars being spent the way we want them to be spent.
And is the intent for that $2 million to extend through the end of the ARPA availability period?
Yeah.
Yes.
Of 2026? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to clarify something there, though, when it said to purpose to open 2 more community centers within the housing authority for year-round programming and to start programming with regards to youth violence, gang activity, and mental health within the Athens community. Are those 2 separate things, or was that, okay, they are. That's what I was thinking.
That's why I put in parentheses 875,000.
So they'd be.
Right. I just wanted to clarify that wasn't, they weren't necessarily going to be in the community centers. Yeah, I just.
Yeah. So those 2 separate things. Yes, ma'am. 2 separate things.
Jesse had a question about that.
Yeah, I guess it's more just a piece of feedback. However we decide to narrow that focus, I would encourage us to retain the violence prevention.
For sure.
And I don't mean to be nitpicking too much your words, Mr. Mayor, but when you kind of listed that as this or that, to me, it's whatever we pick and violence prevention. You know, violence prevention can look a lot of ways, but what I'm hoping we can do with this money is say, well, if we as a county are trying to kind of dip into how can we step up to help our youth, right?
Right.
Specifically tying what we do to whatever outcomes we can define, however we choose to evaluate it, qualitative and quantitative. But as we're measuring outcomes, we're measuring the outcomes of reductions in violence, reductions in harm. And so that's
my point. Yes.
Whatever RFPs go out, whatever program descriptions, whatever mission and vision and values, I just hope that any given thing, we're including violence prevention as part of that. And I very much trust my colleagues to hone in on where we want to go with further narrowing the population beyond that.
Yes.
You know, I hear you on that. And I guess just having worked in the youth development space, we know that everything from quality nutrition for those newborns to, positive activity to those 12-year-olds can all be very clearly tied to violence prevention. But we won't be able to do all that stuff.
But as we're tracking, whatever we're tracking, I hope that part of what we'll find a way to start to track is those incidents of violence, right? So if we're saying, the incidents of violence that happened in this area that this community center serves went up or down, instead of just saying we served this many kids.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I'll be disappointed if 2 years from now, we get a lot of great data that says how many kids we served and what their ages were and what their income levels were, and there's nothing around,
That's not the intent for me.
It sometimes gets defined as outcomes, not output.
Exactly.
Yes.
There you go. That's
The number of human bodies going through the door.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a small part of it. But I think too, one of the data, and this is all on the police department's transparency website, is you're talking about this year's youth violence incidents in that age bracket. Hopefully, it's in that gang age area, recruiting and stuff, and we're talking middle and high school. And if this group starts focusing on the victims and the families, the victims and the collateral damage, so that is a number that we have no more of and less of. According to the police, you could count the shells that were shot in an incident as a thing as well. But they've got the things to count, and I look forward to us doing anything we can to have the attendance numbers are up and the incidence numbers go down, and having that.
And we got nonprofits locally. They got the program, but they don't have the capacity, administrative capacity. That's why I thought Boys and Girls Club would be a good conduit for them. Let them worry about the administrative piece. That they nonprofit that concentrate on those type of things. They do the program and do the leg work and do the boots on the ground.
I just want to make sure that we don't overlook programs that focus on the arts and the environment and nature. I mean, there's like tons of studies out there that talk about these kind of activities, improving mental health, lowering violence. So I know they seem to get swept under the rug these days, but I think it's really important that we, allow these, any groups that are focusing on those kind of activities to be considered.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
My just 2 cents on that is just like I was saying with the workforce development and thinking about what's really going on, with that new business coming in, that we also sort of like looking at the police information, the data, where those hotspots are, so that we are getting the hotspots that aren't necessarily the housing authority, but the, where they're showing us, the police are showing us all the gang activity on the east side and in Clarke Gardens and Athens Gardens, and really target some of those areas, not.
Probably don't need to do door-to-door recruiting in the corridor between Melissa's house and mine.
Yeah.
Right, but we really do that, and just focus it. So I think we're all in the same.
Speaking of environment and youth activities, whatever happened to the community gardening program? So like that.
I don't know, that was something Commissioner Parker had. We just
Yeah,
never.
they're supposed to send out RFPs.
So we had a proposal from Cooperative Extension, and the commission, elected not to pursue that proposal. Is that what I'm remembering?
We were supposed to send out have it be an RFP process.
I don't.
There was some kind of sending it back to the drawing board vote.
And I just can't remember how that was framed.
I remember we voted to have it go out for an RFP process, and we were told that it would probably take about, it was either 60 or 90 days for an RFP.
I have an idea. Maybe when the youth development group gets together and one of the RFPs comes in for community garden for youth, we know there's another 150,000, and that wasn't ARPA, was it?
General fund.
General fund that's sitting there that can be, that could help maybe in a way that ARPA money doesn't. That 150,000 if an idea comes
Well,
forward.
I'll really surprise myself with what happened.
December 6th, agenda item number 23. There's a substitute motion to approve the item as presented that failed in a 4-5 vote. And then the original motion to direct staff to craft an RFP for a community garden program passed unanimously after that.
Youth,
Um,
community garden, right?
well,
I don't think it was in the motion, but I do remember that being.
I do have a note here that says Commissioner Wright cites the importance of the RFP, including language for youth development.
You said it again.
But I don't know if that was,
Get in the hard
I don't know if it was formally built into the language of the proposal that passed. I have to check the minutes for that.
He needs that archival job at the day meeting. at the
15, thank you.
Classic Center, that's the clerk's office.
We will follow up. All right,
So before we do, I also want to make sure I'm clear in my mind. So in June, then we'll have start having this conversation.
so what I'm ready to do is have staff craft an agenda report. And ideally what we would do, I think we would probably memorialize an MOU with CCSD and do this kind of under the same agenda report, given that we're talking about ARPA expenditures. Does that make sense to you, Blaine, or?
Now,
In June.
so let me just,
We're adding, it'll be added to the
Well,
current agenda.
it may end up being the 13th rather than the 6th, just to give everybody a little bit of time.
Back to-
We're 2 weeks away from the 6th. I don't know if we've got the opportunity to draw everything together.
So work
But June is my.
June work session.
Okay, that's fine.
well, a couple of points on
If you have it,
So, so one, two separate agenda items, one for workforce, one for youth development, violence prevention. And in that one, there would be an MOU, kind of high level with with CCSD. And Mayor, you were letting me know that their board meeting is the second Thursday of the month.
I think that's right. Is that when they vote?
Yeah.
So that would be good timing if you want to just do it all together.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I hear y'all and I agree with you, but well, right now, what we're saying on the Boys and Girls Club is that there will be an action on either June 6th or the 13th to say we're allocating these funds to the Boys and Girls Club. And then we would work with the Boys and Girls Club to draft the scope. They do the risk assessment. And we can go ahead and start working on this now, that seems to be the direction we're heading in. And then we would come back to you with a contract or agreement, if you will, for approval that lays out outcomes that are desired and what the scope is and things of that nature. One thing I want to caution y'all on, because I heard it today, it's like, well, we want to measure our success by the violence in the community. So, but what I'm just saying is it comes from all over, right? It comes from people from out of town. It comes from 24-year-olds. It comes from 18-year-olds. And when we give the money through others, maybe it's a 5th grade reading program, or maybe it's a 7th grade. So I don't know if we're going to see, unless you start with a data set or a population of people that we can say, here's a baseline, and then after 6 months, here's a change. If we just go to the police reports on shootings, I'm not sure the correlation will be there.
yeah, my point is, it's there to correlate, just when you give us an incident report, no CCSD, no UGA involved, you know what I mean? Those connect points, obviously, some of the ones that have been downtown and,
We could get reports from within the schools about, violence and behavioral.
yeah, there's some overlapping
School.
subset in it,
Sure.
I think.
But part of this I hear, we want to give some autonomy to the Boys and Girls Club to do some programming in the community with y'all. I think I'm just hopefully preparing y'all to, as vague or specific you are about the outcomes is what they'll do, right? The vaguer you are, then we may not get the population you're looking for, or vice versa. If you script them too tightly, then you may be inhibiting their creativity. So this is something for us all to think about, because clearly outcomes is what everybody wants. Action, we want to decrease in those things. So, and that's part of the write-up that I gave you. We gave you a lot of data. We can tell you how to open up a center. We can tell you how to sign an agreement with the Boys and Girls Club. But what of all that data do you want to hone in on? What do you want to focus on? If you ask Dr. Hooker, he might say, well, I think third grade reading scores are going to, 10 years from now, help us. Somebody else, might say, let's work with some 18-year-old gangbangers and help them. And the answer is, well, you got to do all of that, right? So, just something to think about, and the $2 million, it'll go quick, and we just have to be intentional about what we want.
Right, and there is a model, Carol asked me about when I was talking earlier this week, they have a model or a template or even a curriculum they use. That type of thing, so I think that's important for us to know.
Yeah.
There's a curriculum that they already have,
Yeah.
and there's a model that they have.
Cause we wouldn't say like, we want to open these centers so that the Boys and Girls Club is in charge of teaching children about youth violence, gang activity, and mental health. No, it's a curriculum that we would like for them to tie into the things that they already do, so that the children that they are serving gets each and one of these components in some sort of way. But we do want to incorporate it into the curriculum, but we don't want that to just be, hey, come to the Boys and Girls Club so we can teach you not to be involved in gangs.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say, for the sake of argument, we've got several hundred gang members in the community. I don't know. The police could tell us that.
There's hundreds.
And with the community centers, maybe you're dealing with 30 kids at a time. So I'm saying that just to make sure you get the outcomes you want, it's probably more indicative of that group of what their experience is, as opposed to, did we reduce gang violence by 50% when we're dealing with 30 people? You just got to scale it, and you got to be fair to the Boys and Girls Club about their chances.
I want to be mindful of the time. There's still money left over in this bucket after that, about 5 million, right?
Maybe 4 million.
Or 4 million. And then there's the school district partnering to
Our
form.
steering.
So,
Yeah.
you know, we've talked a lot about how do we use the ARPA money to do something transformative and not just kind of like briefly augment what's the kind of same old stuff, or, you know, the same thing in a new place, but then that money runs out and what do we do? You know, I know that sometimes we're reluctant about strategic plans, but one of the things that I don't think we've ever had is a county-wide strategic plan that looks at the effectiveness of youth programming with regards to violence prevention. So however we want to structure whatever future agenda items come forward, whether it's an amendment to this or something that might come after in the time we've got before the ARPA deadline hits, that's, I think, part of what I would see as valuable. Whether that's tied to a specific program that we're upstanding at the same time, or it's just kind of some analysis that we want to initiate. But I think once we find a way to start collecting that information, hone in on how do we define violence, how do we do a better job of figuring out what programming actually correlates to reductions in violence, it's going to be hard for the community to not find a way to keep funding that, because we're going to see that information and we're going to want to know where it leads. But right now, you know, the closest thing we have is a series of scattershot things with maybe the well-being project giving us the best local level data, but it's still not explicitly honing in on this and like really, you know, which programs and in which areas are actually effective for disrupting this. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Motion to adjourn?
I'll still second it.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Delayed second,
All right.
just, yeah, I'm picturing it.